We celebrated my father's-in-law birthday on 6th of October, and I told him that he's so lucky, because when I was in Egypt, the whole country was celebrating 6th of October. In this video, I will take you on a journey of the preparations of the birthday in details, while sharing for the first time my story with Israel. This time I wanted to do something cute called charcuterie. Usually it is a board, but I made it a box. I'm Teresa Khalil, a writer, a documentary filmmaker, and in this series, titled Stories with a Question Mark, I share real stories that may provoke some questions. The story began when I moved to live in Egypt. And every year we celebrated on 6th of October the victory of Egypt over the Israeli enemy. At school we prepared dances, and at home the television broadcast films, TV series, and songs that remind us of the war and the victory of Egypt over Israel after 1967 defeat. TV series like رأفت الهجان or جمعة الشوان, who were spies for Egypt and Israel, movies such as The Bullet is Still in My Pocket or Budur, and songs like Keep the Weapon Alive, خلي السلاح صاحي, or دول مين ودول مين دول عساكر مصريين, which means who are those, who are those? They are the Egyptian soldiers. I remember spending 6th of October, which is a national holiday, watching this intensive condensed national war and victory productions that I felt charged with a mysterious energy, and I found myself jumping on the couch and going under the table and telling my mother, "Mama, I want to go to war, I want to fight." And my mother laughs and shares with me her stories from those days and how they used to cover the windows with dark blue paint so they are not an easy target to the Israeli enemy, and how they used to put bags of sand in front of the house in case some missiles hit. At school, she was being trained to use guns in case they have to go into a face-to-face fight with an Israeli soldier, although she didn't have a gun outside the school. She told me how horrific those days were and very difficult. Not enough food, the whole country's budget was drained in the war, money was a struggle and very difficult to get. When one of my stories won the university's competition, I thought of joining the literature group, and the professor who was the group supervisor told us in one of the meetings something I considered shocking. He said that Egypt didn't win the war against Israel in 1973. He talked about how the Israeli forces were able to penetrate the Egyptian lines later on, and how that Sadat was able to seize the opportunity and sign a peace treaty with Israel, and this is not a victory. I went home that day confused. If Egypt didn't defeat Israel, then what are we celebrating every year on 6th of October? But as I knew that politics is confusing and never straightforward, and if you want to live in peace, you shouldn't be bothered with politics. So I put aside the whole issue, and I continued to enjoy and relive the victory every year with 6th of October celebrations, with all the powerful energy I got from the TV series, songs, and movies, and the whole atmosphere. I moved to live in Sharm el-Sheikh, an Egyptian city in Sinai. I began shooting my film Sharmer, which you can watch now on the channel divided into chapters. So you can watch the chapter you are interested in, whether it is the Egyptian foreigners' relationships, real estate investment, old Sharmers, Bedouins, and much more. So because I had a part in my film about the Egyptians and foreigners' relationships, a guy contacted me and presented himself, saying that his name is Nadim and that he is doing his master's in the mixed marriages, and that he himself is a son of a Russian mother and a Palestinian father. That's why he's interested in the topic. He wanted to meet me to give him the contacts of the people I interviewed for my film in the mixed marriage part, and to talk about the whole topic as well. We met, and he was speaking Arabic, but during our conversation, he mentioned that he's an Israeli. After all the movies, TV series, and songs I was brought up on, the mention of the word Israel was enough to put me on guard, as if an antenna popped up from the top of my head. And I asked him in panic, "Are you Palestinian or Israeli?" And he told me something I considered very weird at that time. He said, "I am Arab 48. As someone who doesn't care about politics, I didn't understand what does this mean. So he explained, saying that he is Palestinian, but those who were in a certain place on the map during the declaration of the Israeli statehood became Israeli citizens." And he continued complaining about the difficulty of his life at that part of the world and that spot on the map that is full of problems, and how that he wishes to change his identity, as he is not welcomed in the Arabic countries and not welcomed in the Western countries. He told me he's in a relation with a Norwegian girl and he dreams of marrying her and getting the Norwegian nationality and live with a new identity that is far from all the complications. At the end of our meeting, I got more comfortable with him and my antenna went down. He asked me if I have any suggestions for a cheap hotel to stay for a few days because he's struggling financially and can't afford the prices in Sharm el-Sheikh. I immediately recommended him the youth hostel as it was very affordable. But as I'm not into politics, I forgot one important thing. The youth hostel is run by the Egyptian military forces. Nadim went to the hostel and as he speaks Arabic, they welcomed him. He asked for a room, they offered him one, and then they asked for his data and passport. Once the receptionist saw the passport, his face turned pale. He went inside, got another employee, and they seemed to be in panic. They gave him the room, but the next day, very early in the morning, they told him that he has to leave immediately, as all the rooms have been booked by a sudden conference. This is what Nadim told me later on, while complaining about his bad luck. And only then I remembered that the youth hostel is run by the Egyptian military forces. I apologized to him for my mistake and felt so grateful that I'm not in a complicated situation like Nadim is. During my film master's studies in Europe, one of the master classes was given by an Israeli director banished from Israel and was a refugee in France. We watched his documentaries, which were the reason behind his exile. One of them was a documentary about the Israeli education system, and we saw the children in the kindergarten reliving the Torah tales as if it is happening now. So, for example, the teacher tells the children, "Come on, quickly, the Egyptians are chasing us." And the little kids run in fear of the Egyptian enemy. In advanced stages, they take them to field trips, not to the zoo or the fun fair, but to Europe, to ex-Nazi camps, or what is left from it, accompanied by horrific, painful stories of their Jewish grandparents and how the world discriminated against them. We saw the children, the future young generation, at the age of 14 or 15, crying in deep sorrow and pain for what happened, as if it is happening now. The Israeli director found this to be corruption of the children's views and a fuel of the feeling of discrimination in their minds. His views didn't agree with the Israeli government vision, and not only that he was banished from the country, but also from his family and friends, who saw him as a traitor. When I was in Hungary, and as I am fond of getting to know new cultures, I joined a Couchsurfing meeting. And if you want to learn more about Couchsurfing, I will leave links in the description box to related videos and to my books. One about how to use the website, a guide to the website, and the other one is in Arabic, stories with the people I met through this website. During the meeting, we gathered around a table in one of the cafes, and each one was introducing himself. The girl sitting beside me introduced herself, and she was from Israel. Then I introduced myself. I am Teresa from Egypt. And once I said Egypt, I felt that the girl's antennas popped up. And I became more sure of this when she began attacking me for anything I say. So for example, I was saying that the traffic was so crowded today. And she said, I don't think there is more crowded traffic than Cairo. During the whole meeting, she was treating me as if I am her enemy, as if there is a war between us. Although it was the first time for me to meet her. I could have treated her the same way, but all what I could see was that girl in kindergarten and how she's running while the teacher is shouting at her, "Run, run, Egyptians are chasing us." And I saw her in the trip to the Nazi camps, crying in sorrow of how the world is discriminating against her. I could only see the big picture and deal with it calmly, smiling at every attack she points towards me. I can't say that we could have been friends because it needs years and years for her to forget what was implanted in her subconscious and to be able to see the big picture as well. I went home after the meeting and I never forgot this encounter because it added to my vision of the world, like another piece of puzzle that enabled me to see closely life in Israel. Being in Croatia, I got a friend from Albania, and she was fond of the Jewish religion, although she didn't believe in it, but enjoyed attending the ceremonies. One day she asked me if I would like to join her to attend the Jewish Shabbat, which is a ceremony and dinner that takes place on Friday night. I agreed immediately because Judaism was a religion which I had no chance to get to know closely due to my Arabic upbringing. So the Shabbat was on Friday evening, there was some prayers and then gathering where they share food and wine as preparation for the Day of God, which is Saturday, where people are not supposed to do any activities. Jewish in Croatia are minority, so the ceremony was in an apartment in a building in the city center in an upper floor. It was dark, so to get upstairs I turned on the lights, but my friend panicked, warning me that I should not turn on the lights, according to the Jewish rules. I replied saying that I can't go upstairs in the dark. After we went up and the lights went off again, I noticed that other people did come up without turning on the lights. On the door there was a female guard with a gun, and this reminded me of the dark history of discrimination against Jewish on this side of the world. I was introduced to the rabbi and his son, who was a young man in his early 20s, a Croatian, but he felt he belonged more to Israel. He was preparing to spend 3 years in the Israeli military army. It was for me surprising, as Croatia was in peace. Wouldn't it be better for him to stay in his peaceful country instead of volunteering in the military service in an area of conflict and restless? Some of the attendees were wearing normal clothes, but others were dressed in conservative black ones. After the prayer ceremony, we gathered around a table filled with food. Each one brought some kind of dish, boiled eggs, salted fish, and other dishes. That reminded me of the Easter in Egypt. When they asked me where I was from, I said Egypt. But it seemed that they thought I was a Jewish Egyptian. And many of them had beautiful things to say about Egypt and their memories of it. They mentioned the famous Egyptian singer Kulthum, Abdul Halim Hafiz, and how those were the days that they miss. I came out of the meeting with an idea for a documentary film. in which I get closer to a religious Jew, his or her thoughts, lifestyle. But till now I didn't get enough courage to do this, as I don't know what will be their reaction when they discover that I'm not an Egyptian Jewish. I'm an Arab. Would they question my intentions behind the film? And that's it. That was my story with Israel. I wonder if you have some other stories with Israel. I hope that my stories will make you think and question. I hope that the birthday preparations were inspiring. If you want to watch my documentaries, there is a playlist of them in the description box. And you can also learn more about how to support my work. See you in a coming video.